Good evening. I'm Pittsburgh City Councilman Daniel Lavelle,
And I'm Councilman Reverend Ricky Burgess.
and we welcome you to another airing of Black Pittsburgh Matters. Black Pittsburgh Matters is a series of virtual town hall meetings affirming a citywide agenda that indeed Black Pittsburgh does matter. Black Pittsburgh Matters mean that Black lives matter. We must protect the health and safety of Black people. Black Pittsburgh Matters means we must rebuild and invest in Black communities. And Black wealth matters. It means we must increase Black employment and entrepreneurship opportunities.
The Black community has been disproportionately affected by concurrent crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic crisis, and race relations, which is a public health crisis. Normally in times of crisis and great change, we'd be coming to you as the Black elected officials of Pittsburgh and having meetings across the city with our constituents, partners, and allies face to face. But since we cannot do that safely in the current pandemic, we're now using this medium platform to come to you in the ways in which we can to talk about what we're doing and discuss policy and legislation concerning Black Pittsburgh. These meetings will be available via Facebook, YouTube, and the city's cable channel. You can contact or ask questions via the Black Pittsburgh Matters Facebook page or email us at blackpghmatters@gmail.com. And through our live feed right now, today's town hall meeting topic is government's response to present dilemmas in the Black community and the role of government at the state, county, and city levels.
As you all know, Reverend Burgess and I are members of Pittsburgh City Council, which is a part of the Pittsburgh city government. And as such, we write legislation and manage the city budget and oversee the essential city services that the city and its associated authorities perform. We oversee public safety, including police and fire, economic development, our parks, public works, and even our public water. However, there are many things that we cannot do without partnership and with other governmental entities. And so we are also a member of a larger group of governmental officials committed to creating a just, Black, and well and prosperous Black Pittsburgh. And that is the Pittsburgh Black Elected Officials Coalition.
The PBOC is composed of 5 Black elected officials from state, county, and city level, all committed to Pittsburgh, where African Americans can thrive. While Councilman Lavelle and I work on the city level, we coordinate with the PBOC from the county, state levels to realize our shared vision for Black Pittsburgh. You know, the funny thing is I get calls all the time asking me for state things. The funniest call I've ever gotten, Daniel, I got a guy called me and asked me for Obama's cell phone number. But people, they get that, they misunderstand the government shared, you know, that we have government at all sorts of levels.
Indeed, and especially now during the time and space that we're living in, unfortunately, people don't fully understand that when it comes to, and we can take an easy issue like police reform right now, that many of the demands that people still are sending to the city are not issues that the city can address. There are state laws that sometimes preempt the city. There are federal laws that sometimes preempt states and cities. And so in order to really achieve the necessary effects, we have to have partnership. And so what we really wanted to do today was just take a moment to allow our various partners in the various levels of government to also have an opportunity to talk about how their levels of government affect our community, both coming out of hopefully coming out of the COVID pandemic, as well as addressing social justice issues. Because the reality is no single level of government can accomplish all this by itself. We have to be in partnership with the county. We have to be in partnership with the state and the federal government. It takes all levels to really have the impact that our community is looking for.
And even though we won't talk about the federal government tonight, we sent a letter to Vice President Biden, who's running for president, hopefully to bring him to Pittsburgh, because federal resources, things like, you know, the new development in the Hill and in Homewood and Larmer only happen through federal dollars. And we need a larger stake of federal dollars going to our urban cities. Well, tonight we are honored to be, tonight we are honored to be joined by members of the PBOC tonight. We are honored to welcome State Representatives Jake Wheatley, Ed Gainey, as well as Allegheny Council members DeWitt Walton and Olivia Bennett to the Black Pittsburgh Matters Town Hall this evening. Hello, all.
Hey, what's up, Rev? What's up, Daniel?
How you doing?
I'm good. I want to thank you all for having us on. I wanted to first, as we always do, I wanted to make sure to give some background. Rev mentioned there were 5, but we've grown to 7 plus 1. And it's really because when we began almost little over 3 years ago, we began as a response kind of to our community demanding that we kind of come together collectively to work towards legislative reforms that were going to transform the conditions of our community. And for people who have been around long enough and watched our politics long enough, they know traditionally people who sat in the seats that we now serve in didn't always get along, didn't always share, and didn't always kind of work together. And it ended up being a negative thing for our community. So when we kind of got together, it was Rev, Daniel, Ed, DeWitt, and myself in the beginning. But then we grew because Liv came on and Summer came on. And although Austin isn't quote unquote a member of the Pittsburgh Black elected officials, he is one of our members because we serve beyond the Pittsburgh boundaries. And so I think as both of you mentioned earlier, you know, in order for us really to have the types of impacts that we want in our community, we really do need all levels of government working together towards a similar goal. Doesn't mean that we all believe the same things, don't mean that we always agree on strategies on how to get there, but we should at least have a collective table to work together. So I appreciate you all giving us space and having this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Representative Wheatley. And for those who are unaware, Representative Wheatley is our sort of official leader within the Pittsburgh Black Elected Officials Coalition. So I just want to thank him for his leadership. If State Representative Ed Gainey is ready, what I would like to do is just take a brief moment for both you, Representative Wheatley, and Representative Gainey, to talk about how the state can address both the community as we deal with the COVID crisis, as well as social injustice issues. And then I would ask our county representatives to do the same. And then I think we have some more specific questions about you all's work and your legislative efforts.
Come on, Ed.
Yeah. First, Jake.
He asked you to go first, Jake.
Okay. So as we all know, cities, townships, and boroughs and counties really are manifestations of the state. One of the things that we always talk about is this delicate balance between the authorities of state and the federal government. That's, I mean, really, when you look at when we first began in this country forming a government, it really was the battle between who was going to have the say. Was it going to be a centralized federal process or a localized state process? And so a lot of activity, a lot of the things that people want to see happen comes through the state. We don't necessarily provide the direct services, but we really provide the resources, or we provide the kind of we set the parameters for what can happen. I mean, I use this all the time. School districts and whatnot, they have their local authority, but they really have, the state sets the standards for them, sets the parameters for them, and then they kind of manifest what they want to manifest with a local twist. The same thing at the city governments. They have local kind of decision-making authority, but we kind of tap what they can, how much revenue they can raise and how they raise their revenue and what they can do, as we've seen even with the gun situation, trying to manage the control of the city laws. We have preemption authority at the state level. So it really is, when we talk about how we impact change in a long transformative way, you got to hit the city level, the local level, you got to hit the state level, and you got to hit the federal level, because they all kind of work together if you're going to really have those long sustainable changes. So I don't want to take up Ed's time, but that's my little civic lessons for the night. But the state, if I must say so, the state is where a lot of it happens, and people don't know that. People don't really even know who their state senator or their state rep are. They don't know what to go to them for. Sometimes they go to us for things that we really don't have. It's really not our authority to do, but because we want to serve people, we get involved in it. but really when you talk about it, it's really the mechanism. We set the regulation and we provide the resources to set the stage for what people want to do in the local areas.
Hey, thanks for having me this evening. I appreciate it. I think Jake laid it out well in regards to the duties and responsibilities of state government. I think when we talk about police violence and we talk about social justice, a lot of the laws pertaining to the things that we change, such as force, such as professional decertification of police officers, such as several other bills that we have out there right now. Yeah, that do start from the state level, and we have to continue to fight, such as arbitration and things like that, so that we can create a culture. Like I always tell people, if you want law and order, you gotta come to the state so that we can pass new laws to get new order, or we're gonna have the same old song. And we know that the same old song does not work for us. However, there are some things that, regardless of politics, can be done even at the local level. And that is just changing some of the ways that police officers get hired. Some of that is not all legislative because some of it is more subjective than objective. So some of that can be changed. So when you talk about how do you change police culture, yes, legislation is one part of it, but legislation is not going to legislate hate out of anybody. Some of the things is how we better select police officers based on a new criteria of what we have to do, particularly going forward. I think if you want to change police culture, you have to pull out the root of the police history. We know that there's been police violence on African Americans regardless of the decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, 2020. African Americans have always had to deal with that. That's why Summerlee and I introduced the use of force use of force bill, because we know that that will help to save a lot of people, but that's not the end all. The end all is rooting out the culture of policing and changing it. And if we don't do that, then we're still going to have the same problems 30 years from now. We have to change the way we hire police officers. For instance, for me, I can't understand how a cop that comes from a county that he never grew up around black or brown people can become a cop, and the only thing he know about is what he see on TV. That's a problem. And then you put him in a zone like Zone 5, that's a problem, because now he don't see protecting us. You know what I mean? He sees us as a different way based on what he viewed on the nightly news. That's not us. That's not us at all. So I think there's all certain things that at a state level we do, but I think when it comes to really pulling out the root, that's a three-pronged approach. It starts at the federal level, as Jake talked about. It's also at the state level, and it's also at the local level. But in terms of hiring officers, in terms of some of the processes that they have to go through, some of that can be changed without legislation.
Thank you. County Councilman Walton, County Councilwoman Bennett, you want to talk about the county's influence? You're on mute, DeWitt.
Yeah, you're on mute.
I'll defer to you, Liv, and I'll defer to you and follow.
All right. So on the county, somewhat like the city, we have budget. We have budgetary responsibility. We vote on a budget, so we're able to make those types of decisions. And I think a lot of the conversation has been around, if you're talking around defunding, specifically, that has been around, conversation has been around taking money from police forces, budgetary, taking the line, just reducing the line item budget basically, and allocating those funds towards community resources or programs that will be better resources to the community or better responses to certain police calls. So, excuse me, I think that the county has some ability to kind of work in those areas, being that we do have authority over county police. So we obviously have some budgetary items that go towards law enforcement. But we also have been, Councilman Walton started the work, and I've kind of picked it up, and maybe, I don't know what to call what we're doing right now. But anyway, the Civilian Police Review Board. So, you know, that's another place that I think that would be a very impactful change and would really impact how the community is relating towards police and vice versa when you have civilian oversight over police departments. So that came up last year on county council, didn't pass. So really been working to try to get something that is able to get passed this year, so that we can really start working to get a civilian police review board. in Allegheny County. As we know, we have one in Pittsburgh, but that is one police force out of over 100 that we have in the county. So we would like to start getting maybe some aligned standards throughout the county, and the Civilian Police Review Board would probably help with creating some of that. So that's where I'll stop, and I'll let Councilman Walton go.
While I concur that one of the most critical things that we address is police violence towards citizens, and the Independent Police Review Board is a critical tool in addressing that issue. That is one step of many that we play as county council persons. Allegheny County, as a legal entity, spends over $3+ billion a year in providing services to the residents of Allegheny County. 3 billion with a B. So we need to look at that very analytically. One plus billion of that is spent by the Department of Human Services, DHS. And that talks about a whole host of programs that addresses the challenges that our residents are confronted with, whether it is childcare, after-school programs, pre-K, those kinds of programs, whether it is running the county health department, whether it is a mass of the things that DHS does. We set that budget, and we have to look at that budget and very analytically and ensure that organizations that look like us, that are driven by people that look like us, have the opportunities to provide goods and services in our communities, and at the same time, meet reasonable accountability standards to warrant continued funding over a substantive period of time. Additionally, we as Allegheny County Council, we approve the overwhelming majority of appointments to boards and authorities. So those are policy kinds of positions that we have ability to impact and measure how it impacts our community. We also, as county council, have the ability to impact the hiring of our staff, which I am very disappointed in. I've been a member of Allegheny County Council for 5 years, and I'm truly disappointed that at this point, there is no African American on the county council staff. That must change. I've advocated for it for 5 years, and I will not stop until there's diversity on that staff. We must have our fair share. Tax incentives. Tax incentives are created to induce investment in our county. We have the ability to influence what gets a tax break and how long that tax break lasts. When I was chair of economic development up until this year, I demanded that when we look at construction, that there was a job, there were jobs looked at, viewed from the design side, the construction side, and the careers that remain post-construction, that African Americans have to get their fair share. I don't know if those same standards are being held to now. I'm no longer economic development director, but those have to be addressed. Those issues are critical to our community, to ensure we get our fair share. So there are a myriad of ways. And with all of the COVID dollars that have come to the state government from the feds and down to the state, to the city, and to the county. We have to make sure that those COVID allocations address some of the gaps in our society, in our community. And we have to think about how we continue to spend that $3+ billion. In conversations with the county executive, and I'll end on this point. The county executive and I agreed that when we look at MWDBEs and diversity and inclusion had to be melded together, and we had to look at that holistically. And we are revamping the MWDBE department operation to become the Department of Equity and Inclusion, so that there will be project managers in economic development, in the county purchasing department, and in the MWDBE department to ensure that minorities get their fair share. There's work to be done. There's work to continue that we need to continue to press forward on to ensure that African Americans are not left behind any further, and we must make real substantive progress.
As you know, Daniel and I have been a partner with our mayor, William Peduto, and we've been able to, in somewhat historic ways, to pour money into Black communities. When you talk about Black Pittsburgh, you know, you're talking about really three things: Black lives matter, Black communities matter, and Black wealth matters. But even though we've been able to do this, still, according to many reports, for African Americans, Pittsburgh is one of the worst places to live. And so my question really to the other electeds, I'm going to start off with you guys. First to you, Jake, and Ed, and then back to DeWitt and Liv. You know, you have a great relationship with the governor. I know that you're able to move resources, both of you. But are we doing enough? Is the state doing enough to impact the lives of people in the communities that we represent? 70% of all Black people live in Black communities in Pittsburgh. So, Hill District, Homewood, North Side, the Hill District, Larmer, or is the state doing all it can, or is there much more to be done? I'm curious, a report card kind of on the state work and on the county work in terms of their impacting Black people.
I mean, the report card happens every day when we look around our city and our county and even our state, and we see statistically and in real life, Black and brown people are still on the bottom of everything that is social, economic, and on the health statistics. So we know all levels of government, we have to do much more. We have to change the paradigm. I really think a part of our challenge is when we work in these systems where we are not only a minority, but we are super minority. And when I say that is because most of us are congregated in areas where it's majority African-American. And so the power of what we can do is kind of diluted because, the majority of the people that we do business with or try to do business with from a state perspective, they don't look like us. They don't come from areas like we come from, and their perspectives are very much different. And so you have to figure out a way to work in that system to try to help bring not only resources, but change the conditions of how we are even analyzing our impacts. And so, no, there's much more that we should be doing. I want to tell you though, Austin, Summer, Ed, they are amazing colleagues. They work hard. And matter of fact, they make me raise up. And I'm 18 years in this, and Ed and Summer and Austin make me have to put on my running shoes to keep up. But that's gonna be the type of activity and energy necessary to move and make all of us move this system so we can see the results on the ground. The results on the ground tells us that we haven't done nearly enough.
Ed?
I mean, we haven't done enough, and that's the bottom line. So the answer to the question is no, we haven't done enough. Now let's dig into it. Since I said no, we have not done enough. The reality is there's no level of government that has. At the end of the day, the needs are so big and the needs are so great. And if we took a report card in terms of the level of investment in African-American communities, then if we all took that report card, it would be something else. If we talked about how we're hiring African Americans, how many contracts is going to African Americans? If we're talking about building African American wealth, how many contractors, developers, social service agencies, how many of them are getting money right now to really adequately be able to serve the public? If we really took an accountability of that, we all know what that answer would be. So, and also there's a corporate side, there's a nonprofit side, there's a philanthropy side. There's a whole lot of sides, not just government, need to play a part in order to move the African American community forward. It's just not one entity, it's everybody. And we have to be intentional. Like I told a colleague of mine before, y'all was intentional about keeping Black people out. You got to be intentional about bringing Black people in. So at the end of the day, that's the reality. Until there's an intention to want to do right by Black people, to want to make sure that Black people's contracts are expanding, that people are giving accountability to how many African Americans have got service contracts, how many have got commodity contracts, how many have got general contracts, until we start paying attention, not just from government, but should be led by government, because the reality is we shouldn't be doing business with nobody where they don't have Black workers. There's no reason why you got a whole lot of Caucasians running around in the Black community and we don't see one that looks like us, but we giving them contracts. What is that telling our youth? What is that telling the men out there that's been grinding every single day trying to get into the system to make a living? So there's a whole lot more that we can do and we should do, but we fighting. But we also need allies, and those allies have to step up and say that we have to do right by Black Lives Matter, not just talking about it, not just make it a sexy conversation, but make it something that's concrete that at the end of the day is changing lives. And until we all come together on that vibe right there, then it's just a conversation we're having. If Black Lives Matter, that has to show in money. That has to show in building Black wealth, not just in talking about it. Development is cool, and Rick, you know how I feel about it. I mean, I'm not saying market rate is bad, but what I'm saying is most African Americans in this city don't have don't bring in the wages nor the salary to be able to afford market rate. So at the end of the day, that has to be balanced out if we really gonna build wholesome communities, because if not, that's just gentrification. So there's a lot that has to be done in order to make sure that African American communities are growing. And until we all come together on that vibe, it's just a conversation.
Thank you. DeWitt?
I agree globally with both Jake and Ed, but I also understand that a host of this has to be viewed very situationally. For example, when we look at leadership in the county in general and residency, African Americans make up 13% of the population of Allegheny County. But the county executive touts that 24% of the leadership in county positions are African American. I think those numbers are good, but that doesn't tell the whole story. It's about how we address the challenge. And I'm not, and let me back up, I'm not casting aspersions upon the county executive, because he and I talk about these, and I press every week that I talk to him about we must do more, we must do better at every turn, and we must demonstrate that opportunity abounds for African Americans. But we also have to talk about agencies, non-government agencies. The PBOC has met regularly with the Allegheny Conference. And we told the Allegheny Conference that they had an obligation to hold the corporate community more accountable. You guys remember these meetings when we said we needed to benchmark folks of color in the C-suites. That we asked them to tie improved compensation to greater expenditures with African American vendors and entrepreneurs. That issue hasn't gone away. You also know that we have ongoing conversations with entities like PNC Bank. Myself, as the program director for the Pittsburgh A. Philip Randolph Institute, has ongoing discussions with the CVS Corporation where they are investing $600 million in African-American entities over the next 5 years. And most immediately, as I shared with many of you last week, I have an opportunity to fill 473 employment opportunities by November within the CVS Corporation, and all of those pay living, family sustaining wages. So need we do more? Must we be more focused? Must we be more targeted? Yes, absolutely. I prefer to look at it as, is the glass half empty or half full? I think the glass is half full and we need to pour more into it. We got work to do.
Olivia, you've been in many ways one of our newest members, but you're a breath of fresh air. You have your ear on the ground, as you reminded me the other day. And so, I'm interested in hear your report card. Are we doing enough?
I actually agree with Councilman Walton. I think it's not if we're doing enough, it's what do we still need to be doing? What's out there that needs to be done? Because we didn't get here overnight. This has not become the worst place for Black women to live in 2019. This is an accumulation of different administrations and different people sitting in seats and just not doing the work to bring this region along. So now that we're starting to get people in seats, that we now have a coalition of Black leaders, like the expectation that this is going to change in 1 term, 2 terms, 5 terms, 10 terms is just kind of unrealistic. So again, it's more of what do we need to do? What can we still be doing? What things are we supposed to be still pushing forward to make sure that we're bringing along this region that so that we bring equity and that folks that are living in this area aren't 3 times as likely to die from COVID as other folks in this area. So how can we keep moving along those lines and make sure that when we say Black Lives Matters, that we actually are doing everything to make sure every single Black life matters? I think that's the question, and I think that that's all. I think that's all of our desire. If I'm honest, when I talk to every one of you, it is about moving this forward. It is about raising up what's being said in the street and trying to make that into policy and really pushing forward a Black agenda. So that's where I stand on this.
So Liv, I'm curious. As you talk about moving the agenda forward, as you talk about us working to ensure that indeed Black lives do matter in our city, there have been protests, I believe, every week since the first week in June in some form or fashion. And I know you've participated or been in and around those efforts. I'm just curious to your perspective on how these continued protests will help move that agenda forward. How can we leverage this time and place and the protests that are taking place and those that are in our streets every Saturday on a weekly basis? Is that good? Do you think it's positive? And if so, how does that help push the agenda forward?
I think it is good. I think that all things work together for the good. Kind of, preach a little word for Rev over here. So I think it is good. I think that when we go to push policy, me being able to have a conversation with a more conservative person on my body, I can say, well, don't you hear what's going on in the street? You're not paying attention. So I think that the fact that a lot of these things are now on the presidential platform, the federal platform, being discussed in these campaigns, if those folks weren't in the streets, I should say we were in the streets, then a lot of these conversations wouldn't even be had. So I think that it like I said, it all works together. The street is one avenue. I think we're all one body, and every part of it needs to work seamlessly, and that one piece isn't more important than the other piece, and that we should appreciate and figure out how do we leverage these different pieces and these different segments of our community to kind of bring about one body that is working together to be able to push stuff forward. And I think that is what the street does, is having people on the street does, is that it allows that conversation to happen, because it's not just Liv Bennett coming to say, oh, well, let's talk about this no-knock warrant situation. It's now a whole movement around Breonna Taylor and protest and sharing of her story every single day, like, oh, these cops still haven't been charged. So it's the continuation and the rising up of these stories that allow us to even start talking about these different issues with our colleagues, and it's definitely needed. And I think that you guys probably even appreciate it, because I don't know how much some of this stuff that you guys are now doing would have actually been able to come across or been, appeasing or even thought about by some of your colleagues had they not been seeing so many folks in the street. So I think there's a purpose for it. I think there's a reason. I think that we all play our parts and to get to the end goal.
So to your point, you're absolutely right. I do believe that the protests, and as you know this already, but the police reform pieces of legislation that we introduced and got passed at the end of last July were absolutely the result of those people being in the streets protesting and bringing forth a legislative agenda saying we need you all to adopt these. And I think of the initial 10, and then it was 12 that were handed to the city. Of the ones that the city was actually responsible for, we did about, I think, 75% of what was asked. And that was the direct response to those actually being in the street. So I agree with you. I think it's beneficial.
So, and this whole idea of this moment of police reform, I know that Jake, I've been in some of the meetings with the statewide people, and you want to talk about some of the things that your colleagues in Philly, both state reps from Philly and city council people from Philly, some of the things that you guys have kind of agreed on working on a state level.
Yeah, so there's a lot of activities going on statewide. One is led by a city councilman, Isaiah Thomas. He's been trying to reach out to other local municipal officials to try to have more collaboration, a shared kind of body, kind of like what we brought together in our region, which I think I'm going to toot our horn for a minute. We are a unique force, and people might not realize this, but there is not a lot of bodies like the ones that we brought together, where local elected officials who are African American have come together to say we're going to work as much as we can on legislative things to to transform our communities, right? And so we are like a trendsetter. But anyway, statewide, Councilman Thomas is trying to do similar things. And then we have a working group on police reform legislation from a state perspective that's kind of led by our whip, Jordan Harris. And so we've been working on a packet of bills. I think 4, maybe 5 now of the bills have become signed into law. But there was a group of about 19 or 20 bills that we still are trying to work towards. One of which is Representative Lee and Gainey's use of force bill, which we see as critical. Of course, one is decertification and certification. I see Ed over there. I'm promoting my bill as well. But anyway, long story short, there's a lot of energy. And I just, to add with what Olivia was saying, the energy, a lot of these bills we had introduced well before this year, but they were just sitting in committees, wasn't even getting the light of day. But it wasn't until the international storm from citizens who said enough is enough. We want to see change. We demanding change. We're not going away quietly with no promises of change. And that pressure had a reaction from our bodies. It had a reaction from the federal body, it had a reaction from the state body, and it certainly has a reaction on a local level. So anybody who doesn't appreciate the energy and that's on these streets and what it's doing to help us manifest what they need us to manifest is short-sighted.
So, go ahead, Rev.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to move to a different subject. Go ahead. If you have a follow up.
Well, no, I was going to do the same because there were two things that were said earlier in the conversation. One, Representative Gainey spoke about gentrification, affordable housing, market rate housing, and essentially, I'm paraphrase. Part of what he said is the problem isn't necessarily the housing; it's the problem that people aren't making enough money to be able to choose to live where they want to live. And then shortly thereafter, DeWitt started talking about the various jobs, CVS, he mentioned a couple of thousand jobs that are necessary to fulfill. DeWitt is our workforce development person within this coalition. And so quickly, because we do only have about 15, 20 minutes left, and then we all got to get on to another meeting. DeWitt, if you would quickly tell us what the A. Philip Randolph Institute is, what they do, because as we already know, the Black community had higher levels of unemployment, underemployment. COVID has exacerbated that. And so we need people to have opportunities to get back to work. So if you could talk to us a little bit about your efforts around workforce development and maybe even share one or two opportunities that people may be watching and know someone who needs an opportunity for a job can reach out to you.
He said quickly, DeWitt.
So the viewers can see that they're telling me not to pontificate. But yeah, real briefly, the Pittsburgh A. Philip Randolph Institute, our mission is to identify, recruit, and train members of underserved, underrepresented, and the previously incarcerated communities to build the kind of skills needed to have family-sustaining careers. In an intentional action with organized labor, and particularly the United Steelworkers, we have embarked, for the past 12 years, we've embarked upon finding employment opportunities and that our family-sustaining careers in the construction and building trades, in the manufacturing sector. And over the last year, we've expanded it beyond manufacturing and construction to the emerging energy sector and to the health sector. And so there are incredible numbers of opportunities that continue to emerge. With COVID, there's been a real shift in the kind of employment needed in pure manufacturing and construction, but the need in health and energy are not going to dissipate because folks are going to need power, whether renewables or not, but there's also always going to be greater need for health professions. And so we are seeking individuals who are looking for careers, not jobs, careers, family-sustaining careers. If they're interested, give us a call at 412-562-2432. We'll talk to you about career opportunities. If you belong to a community-based organization, an NGO, any of that, give us a call. We'll come talk to you. We'll do it. We can do it person to person, as long as we meet COVID requirements, or we can do it virtually. There are opportunities out there, and we need to seize the moment.
Ed, one of the things that I want to make sure we have Ed on. Ed is, all of us have different areas of expertise. Ed is, a great political statistician and strategist. And so, Ed, I want to talk to you about voting a little bit. One of the things, you've had the background of being a committee chair of the party and being one of the most effective turnout machines in our city and the ability to deliver votes. How important is it, you think, our election in November is? What's your thoughts around November's election?
I think it's very important. I think that what we got in the White House has to be changed. And I think there's no question about that. And I understand when people say, well, hey, Biden may resemble a lot of the situations that we don't want. But right now, we got two choices. We got Biden and we got Trump. And there's no question in my mind that Biden is a way better candidate and will be a better president than Donald Trump. When you think about the disasters that's happened under Trump, from COVID-19 to race relations to police violence, like one of the things that he said last week that amazed me was that he was the president of law and order. I thought the president was supposed to be the president of the United States. Just his mindset in regards to how he sees himself and how he sees his role as a leader is evil. And all that's been promoted out of that White House has been evil. How you taking babies from the border and separating them from their mother. How you have yet to be able to say that you'll bring police and community together and talk about a strategy, talk about a system, talk about a plan of how we can, you know what I mean, rebuild this trust. Different things that need to happen. He's not been there. The only thing that the mail, right now I had someone call me the other day. She lives in the street in Lincoln, Leamington. I had to call the postmaster. She is COPD. She has not received her medicine in 2 weeks. That's just uncalled for. And those are things that lead to death. That's what I call him, the president of. From COVID and everything else, if we don't understand that we need a change in the White House, then we have to continue to talk about it till they see that we need a change in the White House. November 3rd is major. We have to have a difference maker. It may not be what everybody thinks is great, but at the end of the day, voting is a tool. We have to use this tool to ensure that we get rid of the president that we got right now. And the only way we do that is if everybody turns out in mass numbers to say enough is enough. We are no longer going to be a dictator and a democracy. We must vote.
And Ed, I believe at the root of all those policies and all of what he is doing, in my personal opinion, is racism.
We know it's racist. You know that.
Yeah. But I'm also curious, because I just read an article, and I'm going to ask Liv, but anyone can feel free to jump in. And as I do this, I do want to bring Micah Smith in. Micah Smith is the intern out of Reverend Burgess's office that has helped us create this show. And she says there are some live questions, so I want to afford her the opportunity to ask the live questions. But Liv and anyone else, I recently read an article, it was in the Pittsburgh Courier, around labeling racism for what it really is. And the basic premise behind the article, and I'm asking you this because you often use a lot of terminology that has helped educate me in terms of being anti-racist, white fragility, and all these sort of things. But the article essentially says indigenous people, Latinx community, they're not the reasons that we are disproportionately locked up in prison. They're not the reasons that we see the achievement gaps. It is not just racism, it's explicitly white racism that is the reason for this. So I'm actually curious to get your thoughts on us beginning to move the conversation away from generalizing racism to be more explicit about, in this country, it's explicitly white racism that is the cause of all these other systemic issues that COVID-19 is exacerbating.
Absolutely. So can I rewind a little bit back to Ed's question, because I want to make sure that folks know the deadline to register to vote is October 19th. And you can go to votespa.com to register to vote. Just wanted to make sure I got that in there because I think that's crucial information. But to your question, Councilman Lavelle, yes, there are. So racism, when we talk about racism, we talk about it very generally, like, and I do feel like that we need to be more specific because yes, you're right. There is a specific part of white supremacy, or what you're calling white racism, that is targeted towards Black people. It is specifically anti-Black. So redlining is an example of that. New Jim Crow was an example of that. Lynching, slavery itself. So those were very targeted policies and practices that were targeted to Black people specifically. And that hasn't changed. It's just morphed into different forms of policy and practices that are a little bit more subtle than hanging somebody on a tree. But although we do still see that to this day. So yes, to your point, we have to be very specific about when we're speaking about racism to speak specifically about anti-Black racism, because that is the racism, that is the system that is holding us down, but it also holds the greater part of society down. And until we really address anti-Black racism specifically, we're not really going anywhere.
Thank you. With that, I do want to invite Micah in. Will you ask any pertinent questions that are being asked live?
Yes. Gabriel has asked if there are Pennsylvania local and state government plans stating clear objectives for the current Black agenda for the public.
I could take this. So I want to encourage Gabriel and all of the folk who are watching or maybe see this video. We're in the process right now, started yesterday. It's called the North Star Convention. It's the convention that was headed by Senator Anthony Williams out of Philadelphia, but it's a statewide convention that you all can participate. I'll make sure we post the flyers or the information for registering, but it's leading up to creating what we are calling a statewide Black agenda that will then be delivered to the candidates for elected office at the federal level, both Trump and Biden. And we are pushing that. So no matter who wins in November, we want to make sure that the African-American population in this Commonwealth has put forth a viable plan for them. So again, that they started yesterday. There'll be a session tomorrow on criminal justice reform. I think yesterday's session was on gun violence. There'll be something around economic justice. There'll be something around housing and education. So there are different topic areas, and the public is encouraged to participate and to also add voice to it. So again, I will post that, but we were encouraged anyone who wants to be a part of it to join it.
Although she didn't specifically ask us at the city, I would also encourage her, though, to look at the legislation that we passed called Black Pittsburgh Matters, that has a set of investment principles of saying that we want to invest in, because at the end of the day, it's resources. As I'm a broken record, all those who are on this on the show know I've talked over and over again. At the end of the day, it's about money into the Black community and resources to rebuild Black communities for Black people, by Black people, with our partners and allies. That means, economic development. That means building entrepreneurship, building new housing, building the capacity of community-based organizations, really investing significant amount of dollars, disproportionate dollars, in the Black communities to rebuild them and to transform them from communities of isolated, concentrated poverty into mixed income, stable communities. And so I would have her to look at that. That's at least my sense from a city perspective of one of the ways we create a Black agenda is about demanding not just our fair share now, because of the 200 years of racism and oppression, more than our fair share of dollars and resources.
You're on mute, Micah.
Sorry. Thank you. Next, how does the coalition work together to affect change for Black Pittsburgh, and what does that collaborative process look like?
So we are all individuals who come to the table with different perspectives. This collaborative, this coalition, we believe in consensus building. So what we try to do is build consensus and talk about the things that we think we can do together to transform our community. And so our process has always been, we try to educate ourselves. We try to bring stakeholders to the table who are practitioners and experts in the fields of study, and work with us to develop ideologies and processes and sometimes policy that we can share and work together along. Now, our rule is, though, if one person says no, that they don't agree with what we're doing in our process, we don't do that as the coalition. Individuals are able to do it on their own, but and again, I have to say, for the last over 3 years now, we've been meeting every week, talking sometimes twice a week, working through, we all went through a series of community engagements that created a document that is our agenda that we've kind of worked to try to move in different spaces. So you heard DeWitt talk about us working with the Allegheny Conference and the business community. We've worked in the space to try to work with our social service providers and our Black healthcare providers. So you will see us in different spaces, and we don't always toot our horn, and we don't always show up on the news. But I will tell you, there has been a lot of victories. Ed is good at this saying. There's been a lot of victories in the work that we've done. We just haven't been very good communicators of those victories. And part of it is the fact that, like I said, we have a table where very different people who come from very different walks, who believe very different things, have been able to share and work together for the betterment of our community.
And I think one of the things that we need to talk about, because we are in the COVID-19, we're in this COVID-19 epidemic, is that the Black elected officials fought hard to have testing done in Black neighborhoods. Before we took this fight on, they wasn't even doing testing in Black neighborhoods. It wasn't even a plan to do testing in Black neighborhoods until we brought it to the table. And since then, we've been able to get the Allegheny County Health Department to work with the federal qualified healthcare systems to provide testing in areas such as Homewood, and areas such as Braddock, areas such as McKeesport, the Hill District, and other areas. And that came from us saying, hey, we know that if y'all keep telling us we the most vulnerable community, and we understand the impact that COVID-19 has had on Black neighborhoods, then we need to be out there testing them. We need to be making sure our community get tested. And we fought very diligently and very hard about that to ensure that there was testing done in our community, and we got that. Now, it didn't show up on the nightly news like that. It didn't show up in the paper, but we got that. And I think that's something that's major. That's major right there, to make sure that your community is getting tested. That's major. And we're still talking just to be able to move some other things forward in regards to COVID-19 and things like that. So there are some things that we did, but and I know that, sometimes we don't get the attention that others get, and we ain't crying for that. What we want to do is be effective, and being effective, we're able to save a lot of people's lives in our community. And that's just one example of what we accomplished.
And we should just also point out, Representative Wheatley mentioned a report that we collectively did. That report is called the Peace and Justice Initiative. There's a phase 1 and there's a phase 2 to that report. That report can be found on our website, which is pbeoc.com.
And much of which was in that report, by the way. I think the city adopted a lot of our tenets in the report, and has been operationalizing it already. So anyway, I mean, I think people always look to and point to, to try to show exactly what you've done. Sometimes what we've done is change systems so that they operate differently.
And another thing that we done, and this was actually facilitated through Jake, was just dealing with the community development financial institutions and ensuring that and listen, let me say this first, let me pretext this. It's far from enough. We don't have enough. Bottom line, when it comes to investing in African-American businesses, since the report says we're the most disadvantaged community, we're the most vulnerable community, we don't have enough money. We need more money. We need double, triple to what we're getting right now. But to the credit of Jake Wheatley and myself, Summer, and Austin, to be able to deal with the community development financial institutions and get some money to come back in there to be able to spread out to a couple African-American businesses, that's a bonus, because before then they wasn't getting anything. They were getting the crumbs that they put on the table at first, and at the end of the day, it's still crumbs, but it's an improvement to what they had. Do we need more? Absolutely. There was just a call I couldn't get on the other day that Jake was on to talk about the CDFIs and how we can continue to work to foster that relationship, to push more money into urban areas, African-American communities, particularly in our business community, to help stabilize where we can. Because we know when Main Street get the cold, we get a flu, and we got to make sure that we got the right medicine called capital, meaning money and other resources, to ensure that our community can stay afloat. So those are things that are being worked on. They don't, like I said, they don't get a lot of the media, but we can't control that. What we can control is the narrative that we're trying to do everything we can to help build up a Black community that we know has been underserved.
And Daniel, if I can, real quick, just to lift that point up, there's approximately 1 million businesses that are registered in the state of Pennsylvania, 24% of which are historically disadvantaged businesses. But in this initiative that we were able to do with the help of Ed and Summer and Austin, 50% of the $200 million, 50% of it has to go to historically disadvantaged businesses. Now, what's that mean is you have 24% of the statewide businesses who are historically disadvantaged, but they're going to get 50% of the money. So like Ed said, it's not enough. It's not enough. $200 million was enough. In the first round, they had almost $1 billion worth of requests, but we still had something that was unique. And I have to give Senator Hughes from Philadelphia his due. 50% of the money is going to historically disadvantaged businesses, and that's never been done before.
And we also got to fight like this. And I mean, Jay can talk about it's not a fight, it's just a reality. You know what I'm saying? That we to make sure that the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County gets its fair share, because we know that a lot of that money is going to end up in Philadelphia. That's the reality. I mean, you can check the numbers yourself, but us four have been fighting hard to make sure that we get more than what we was getting in the past. And that's going to be a continued battle. It's not a fight in terms of a negative. It's just saying that, hey, we got Black businesses in the city of Pittsburgh and the greater Pittsburgh region. We need fed. We need to make sure that they're okay. And so that's a constant conversation. But I will say this, at least we're able to have that conversation. At least it's occurring. And that in that conversation, resources are coming back, not to the point that we need. I'll be the first one to say that. You heard me pretext that in the beginning, but there are some things that are happening.
So I want to thank you all. We are running short on time at this point. It's now 7:05, so we've gone over our hour allotment. No, but that's cool. That's cool, because it's worthwhile. And at some point, we will.
The next meeting, I need the link to the next meeting.
I got you, E.
All right, my man.
We'll send it to you. And as Ed just mentioned, all of us are about to join another meeting. So I do want to give you all a break before we have to join that next meeting. But I do want to thank you. And although they are not here with us this evening, I also want to acknowledge and thank Representative Summer Lee for all the tremendous work she is putting in on the state level. She is especially one leading on a lot of police reform, along with our Representative Austin Davis, who is also a tremendous worker and help to our work. So I just want to thank them, although they could not be here. With that being said, I do want to thank Representative Jay Wheatley. I want to thank Representative Ed Gainey, County Councilman DeWitt Walton, and County Councilwoman Olivia Bennett for being here with us this evening, sharing the work that you all are doing on this county and state levels. And I genuinely thank you for partnering with us as members of the PBOC, so we can truly build a city that really has a thriving Black community, and one that is a city for all only if and when Black communities indeed matter.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of the people who are watching us and all of those who are participating either remotely in this town hall meeting. Remember, you can watch this town hall meeting on Facebook, the city's YouTube channel, and on the city's cable channel. A new meeting will occur every Wednesday, and by working together, united in purpose, we can transform our city, strengthening it for all of its residents. Pittsburgh can only be a city for all when it becomes a city where Black Pittsburgh matters. Good evening, stay safe, and be blessed.